Welcome to today's retrospective on the Whale Listening Project, an ongoing immersive experience about the fascinating lives and songs of humpback whales. Today's guests, Katie Payne and Annie Lewandowski, are the driving forces behind the project. Last fall, Annie, Katie, and several global experts held a 4-day hybrid event at Cornell's Johnson Museum of Art that focused on public education about whales and how we can take an active role in reversing humankind's destructive impact on ocean ecosystems and the lives of the beautiful humpbacks. So, yes, we'll be taking a brief look back, but we'll also peer into the future and see what's ahead for the project and our panelists. In the chat, we'll be sharing some links to the recorded keynotes from these hybrid events that we recorded last year. So if you enjoyed today's discussion in any part, you'll most certainly learn a ton from these two keynotes. So they are Hawaiian Humpback Whales, Scientific and Creative Perspectives, and we also have a URL to share for the keynote, The Ever-Evolving Songs of Humpback Whales, featuring Katie Payne and Roger Payne. Now, we were originally scheduled to be together in studio, but alas, the pandemic and an epic blizzard here in New York has left us all homebound and zooming it up once again. So Annie and Katie, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure as always.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, you bet. So excited for this. So let's begin with a little bit of historical perspective. 50 years ago, pioneering bioacoustics researchers Roger Payne and today's guest Katie Payne produced Songs of the Humpback Whale. It was a surprising smash hit vinyl record that had an effect on conservation and environmentalism that is still felt today. The best-selling album introduced the sophisticated, highly structured songs of whales to the world and helped launch a global moratorium on commercial whaling. I even listened to the record as a kid quite a bit, and it still makes me feel something deep to this day, as if it's in my DNA. And that's why I'm so honored to be here with Katie and Annie today. So, okay, viewers, you've got the backstory. A couple of quick notes for all of you out there. This event is being recorded and will be viewable at this very same URL afterward. So if you want to share with friends or colleagues after we're through today, please, this is free and open to the world to view. You may submit your questions in the chat anytime throughout our discussion. You simply open it by clicking the dialog box at the top right of your video player. Throughout our discussion, as I mentioned, we'll be sharing URLs and resources in the chat, so heads up for those. And if you're watching the archived recording, those links will then become available and are available in the overview section just below for those of you who are watching the recorded versions. So on to the show. Katie Payne, I want to ask you, how did you come into this work? It should be noted that you were a music major at Cornell University. How did your background, your interests, your training prepare you for the work you'd eventually go on to do with humpback whales? Take us back to the beginning.
Well, as a child, I was immersed in the music of Bach. My mother loved Bach, played Bach on the piano, took me to the Bach festivals several times. And that was my musical background. How could I not go on in music after that? But I was living on a farm and I loved farm animals. I love animals. And so both parts of it, the biology part and the music part, are just part of what happened. I met, while performing Bach's, a wonderful opera by Bach, the St. Matthew Passion. I met a cellist, Roger Payne, who's showing off on the stage. He's a wonderful cellist and a great show-off. And we got married a year later. He's a wonderful, spontaneous enthusiast. And I think it was when he was reading Moby Dick that he said, we've got to go study whales. A colleague of his at the Rockefeller University said, well, there's a wonderful guy in Bermuda. We'll alert him and you go to Bermuda. And we went together. The wonderful guy was Frank Watlington, a Navy engineer whose job was to collect recordings of sounds in the ocean out by one of the offshore recording stations. They were doing it, putting it on a long cable that went all the way into Bermuda, 28 miles. And Frank's job was to get these recordings off the cable and put them into discs. And while he was listening for the sounds of enemy ships and all kinds of horrible things the Navy was interested in, he happened to hear some unexpected sounds. Well, we went out on a ship with Frank and circumnavigated Bermuda and we were hoping to see whales. I think we spent 5 minutes in the presence of whale tails and humps, and that was all. But we talked about conservation the whole time. And as we were coming into the port of Hamilton, Frank said, "Don't suppose you've ever heard the sounds these animals make." No, we had no idea. We were both musical. He had no idea. He took us into the bowels of the ship, put headphones on both of us, and this is what he played. I want to just leave this on for a good long time. Listen to it. This is the sound of one male humpback whale on the breeding ground, which is in Hawaii, having migrated the 1,300 miles or whatever from Southeast Alaska, where he feeds. And now he's in the breeding ground with females and their newborn calves. And other males. Let's hear it.
We're sharing it with the audience now.
I can't hear it.
That's okay. They hear it.
You hear echoes from underneath the waves and from the bottom of the sea. You hear mostly just the voice of this male. All the low growls and all the high sounds are part of his song. And nobody knew it existed. Like a bird song, it's sung mostly entirely by males. All the males in this population at this time are singing pretty much the same series of sounds. I wish I could hear it. I could. Are you hearing repeating phrases? All the phrases of a type are called one theme. There were 6 or 7 themes in this song, as I remember.
Katie, I want to ask you about the themes. In the presentation, when I saw the presentation that you did called "The Ever Evolving Songs of Humpback Whales," one of the things that struck me so profoundly was the fact that the whale songs, sure, they have a clear structure and a form, much like birds or any other animal that communicates via song, but they're not static, that they evolve over long stretches of time. You may have used the word culture to describe this species-wide kind of relationships with song. That hit me real hard. Can you talk about that, how whale songs evolve over time and what you've learned over the years, decades, actually?
Yes, I want to go to the next slide pretty soon to show that. We went to Hawaii, where there's also singing. It's another breeding ground on the West Coast. The whales come from Alaska down to Hawaii, and there they breed, and there they sing long songs, which are structurally similar to the one you just heard, but the contents is different inside in each one. And we worked there for a series of years. Here I'm showing one little phrase from each of the years that we recorded in. And we called it theme 5. Ooh, ooh, It repeats. Ooh. And by the time we got back to Hawaii in the subsequent year, that phrase was being sung a little differently by all the singing whales. So there are many males singing simultaneously, they're overlapping, but not synchronizing the timing of their singing. And now it sounds like this. Woo, 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 woo. And in every rendition, that phrase is a little bit longer than it was in the previous year. In the next year, 1978, we were back recording again, and you see the phrase has gotten yet longer. Everyone was singing it like this. Ooh, 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 ooh. Mm. 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 You get a pattern out of the changes that are occurring. It looks as though the whales are agreeing that certain principles are being put into effect. For instance, the number of grunts at the end. So make a prediction for 1979. We'll go back. Let's see the next slide. Oh, yet a longer phrase. Greater separation between the first and third notes. Ooh, 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 ooh. And now sing it with me. Mm. 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 And as you can guess, if we are correct in our interpretation of what's going on in these singing whales' minds, there are going to be yet more grunts in the following year. And in fact, the number went up to 13. Isn't that remarkable? And so this was just one theme out of 5. The next theme was also evolving, but in a different way. Theme 6 was composed of 2 sounds. Ooh. Let's see how to, yeah. Whoop, 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 whoop. That was 1976. By 1977, it had changed. Ooh. Whoop, 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 whoop. Again, numbers are changing. And all the way through this sequence, theme 6 was changing in its own way. So the whales are keeping in mind the structure that they're working with, even at the level of the phrase, and the kind of evolution that it's having. And the whole song, therefore, is gradually changing, and you can predict it pretty much, although there are some surprises. And these surprises fascinate me, especially talking to Annie, because there are improvisational changes going on. Suddenly, a new thing will be introduced, and you wonder what's happening. Is this new individuals coming in? What's the story? How come they're changing it? Let's take the next slide. Oh, well. Are the new individual whales recognizable so that we could tell where the origin of these changes are? Well, as it turns out, the underside of the fluke is like a thumbprint. It tells you who the individual is, and there are lots of recognizable individuals. Let's look at the next 2 quickly. See, those are easy to identify. And those whales have been identified in Alaska, in the feeding ground, and back in Hawaii. And they turned out to be three of the whales that we recorded from. So we know that their songs were changing in the same way as the changes that were occurring in the whole group.
So do we see here that songs over the years get phased out? Can you explain what we're looking at here? I think this is kind of interesting. Gives us a broader perspective. Not years 69 to 82. What are we looking at here, Katie?
That's right. If you move from right to the left, we're looking at themes that become so different from the way they were that we give them a new name. And when that new name occurs, the white bar stops and we start a new white bar. So if you look at the third over 1971, you see a new version is starting. And if you look at the next one, 1972, we've even given it a new label, VI, and it's starting, and then it continues all the way through 1982. So the whales are keeping track of all of this. Which ones are changing rapidly? Which ones are being replaced? This is an improvisational feat, don't you think, Annie?
Yes, I do, Katie.
It really is. And so I studied this for two decades, flipping out. And when I met Annie, I thought, oh my gosh, here's an improvisational composer in the human world who can have insights about what may be going on in the minds of the whales.
Annie Lewandowski, let's bring you into the conversation. So, given your background in music theory, performance, neurobiology, tell us how you first connected with Katie. As a music professor, you're coming at this thinking about maybe composition, expression, technique. Where was your head at when you began thinking about whale songs? How did you two come together? Tell us what was going on.
Sure, my pleasure. Yeah. So I'd been introduced to Songs of the Humpback Whale when I was in high school in the 1990s. And from that recording, I learned that humpbacks sang these beautiful songs, and I was totally blown away. But I wasn't aware of the creative process, questions around the creative process behind the songs or the evolution of the humpback whale song until Katie visited a class I co-teach with Ron Hoy called Music on the Brain to talk about acoustic communication in another species. And during Katie's visit, she played humpback song recordings for us and talked about her research on the humpback's changing song. And this struck a chord with me in my own work here at Cornell. I teach classes in songwriting and improvisation, and I find it exciting and rewarding facilitating a creative process with my students, developing their compositional voices, realizing creative ideas together. So when Katie visited our class and I learned a bit about this creative process unfolding in another species, I was totally hooked and wanted to learn more. And Katie very graciously began meeting with me, and we listened to humpback song from Bermuda and Hawaii from the 1970s and 1980s. And I really began a process of tuning my ears to what we were hearing in the evolving song. And I became especially fascinated with some tapes of humpback whale song sessions from Hawaii from 1977 and 1981, which marked this period of really, I think really remarkable song evolution. And this led me to explore that period as the compositional foundation for Cetus Life After Life for Whale Song and Chimes, which I composed in 2018. And in this piece, two humpback song recordings, one from 1977 and one from 1981, play in sequence over the course of the piece, broadcast from 4 speakers on the top of the chimes tower. And I composed a part for the chimes, which traces the evolution of one of the humpback song themes during this period to play in duet with the humpback song recordings. So let's see and listen to the video now of Cetus, the excerpt.
Perfect. Excellent. And for those of you who don't know, Cornell has a very prominent clock tower that you see in this image here that, chimes throughout the day and plays themes related to anything that might be going on. Certainly they strike at noon and what have you. So Chris, roll that video. Let's check it out. Very cool video, Annie. Nice work on that composition. I think that really must have been something being on campus and hearing that. I know that when we did the exhibit last year, you were pumping whale songs out at the top of the Johnson Museum of Art, kind of enveloping the campus, and it was kind of cascading through the trees, and people were hearing it, and people were very much drawn to it. I saw it firsthand. So very cool stuff. I love what you're doing with that from a sonics standpoint. So you two shared an adventure in Hawaii. Here we've got you on a boat making recordings and things like that. Tell us a little bit about this trip out to Hawaii. What was going on here?
Katie and I received support from the Cornell Atkinson Center for Sustainability to travel to Hawaii in 2019 to record Humpback Whale Song with the Hawaii Marine Mammal Consortium, who you see pictured here with Katie. They're in Kauai High Bay on Hawaii's Big Island. Katie, would you like to say a few words about the trip?
It was a blast. And it's not easy to record whales. It's not easy to record sounds made underneath the waves. But she's a whiz. I was so overwhelmed by her skill. And Adam, whom you saw there standing, he was your tutor, right, Annie?
He sure was. He was great.
Yeah. And everybody was so wonderful. It was just a lovely experience. And the whales were there. We would go out in the morning after looking down from a high bluff to see where whales were blowing. We would have a sense where to take the little boat and would go out and get often very close to underwater whales. Sometimes it sounded like a cathedral with echoes, and sometimes it sounded quite dry. The environment, the sonic environment changes with where you are in relation to the underground.
Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit about, as Katie said, where you kind of how close you were in relationship to some of these whales really changed the listening experience. And there's this kind of distant cathedral when they were further away. But then we also had the good fortune of getting close to a few whales. There were 3 soloists in particular that we recorded. And I want to talk a little bit, and Katie, feel free, of course, to chime in whenever, about the first soloist we recorded, which is called Soloist 1 in the PowerPoint. So this is one of our first days out on the water, and the technique for kind of finding a soloist or attempting to find a soloist was we would leave from Kauai High Harbor there, and we had a hydrophone, which is an underwater microphone that we'd, just after we were out of the harbor, we'd lower 30 feet into the water and then listen. And you hear all these humpbacks singing asynchronously at kind of distances that are quite far away. And maybe if you're lucky, you'll hear something that's kind of closer to you. And there's a sound that humpbacks make before they surface that sounds a lot like popcorn popping. And so when we would hear this popcorn popping sound, we would all start scanning the horizon to see if a humpback around that time came up to breathe. And so it was one of the first days on the water. This is so thrilling. And if we go back to Soloist 1, actually, if that's okay for a moment. Yeah. So this one here, so we're listening for this popcorn popping. We hear it, and then we see this whale come up to breathe, and maybe it correlates, maybe not. But we pulled in the hydrophone and we drove a bit closer, put it down again, and it was just, he was our guy. It was totally amazing hearing him start to sing, and he was singing for 8 minutes, and he was so close. The detail on the recording was really amazing. And let's listen to just a little bit of the audio of that now, which is just the UMAP audio, Chris, not the video.
Perfect. Okay, he's going to work on that in the background real quick. I have some questions. Chris, you give me the thumbs up when we're ready to go. Oh, here we go. Here's soloist one.
So I'll talk very kind of just a little bit over this so you can, so you're hearing these amazing sounds, and he's so close to our boat, and then this mid-theme, the song just suddenly stops, and we're all kind of wondering what's going on. We hadn't heard a singer stop, and obviously I had. It seemed like maybe it was a bit unusual occurrence to hear a singer just stop. And like a minute later, he started. There's all this like active surface behavior with him breaching, which we have some photos of, and peck slapping, and it was totally extraordinary to kind of connect with this whale underwater and then see him active on the surface.
Beautiful photos here. It looks like you were really close, actually.
It was amazing, and as Katie was saying, there's the fluke is like a fingerprint, and if we go back to the happy whale, that PowerPoint that says Soloist One, so that is this app where if someone sees a whale and gets a picture of if a humpback gets a picture of its fluke, they can submit it to this app. It's a citizen science project, and basically then it's identified by this happy whale team and app, and then you can see some of if it's been tracked before in other locations. And so we hear with the soloist that we were hearing sing that he'd been seen off of Vancouver Island in 2007 and 2018, and then had been seen in Hawaii in 2019 and 2020.
Perfect. Very cool. Hey, can I bring in some audience questions here? Actually, they're coming in pretty quick, and I think these are good questions to kind of help make some clarifications. First of all, to kind of double verify, it's only the males that sings, yes? That sing?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So Helen asks, do male calves, that is younger whales, do they sing or play at singing? When do they kind of start to take off with their vocalization?
We wish we knew.
There's a succinct answer. So let me ask you this from a physiological standpoint. Not knowing how whales are put together, can you kind of describe how they actually sing? You talked about the popping noises. Does that have to do with the air valve up top? How do things resonate through the body? How do they move? They're not moving air, so something else is happening. How do whales actually sing? Can either of you speak to that?
Well, they are moving air. There are two chambers, and the air passes between them, and vibrates vocal flaps, not quite vocal cords. And that's how it's done. I don't know much. I don't know where the popcorn comes from. And by the way, that was a signal that they were about to surface when we were there. But how about the other years? But no, not in other years. I haven't. That was just that year.
Jennifer has a question. Were there any conditions in the larger environment that may have sparked changes in the whale songs? We're looking back to the historical perspectives and the changes here. It looks like there were years where there were more extensive changes. And let me just double up on this. Risa asks, has the increasing sea traffic, sound pollution affected whale songs and behavior? Are there environmental factors? Do we have any indication as to whether environmental factors contribute to changes in songs or not?
Well, we don't really know. We have never heard imitations of ship noise. Certainly the noise of shipping must affect them. Yeah. But we don't have scientific measurements of that. We just have a fear about it.
Okay, got it. Let's talk about, Annie, let's move back over to you. Let's talk about this project called Siren. This is a collaborative project with multiple people in multiple locations. Set the table for us on Siren, and tell us what that's all about.
Sure. So Katie and I collected these beautiful recordings when we were in Hawaii in 2019, and when we were returning back to Ithaca with them, my original idea was for Siren was to create an experience for audiences that resembled what it feels like and sounds like being close to a humpback singer. So in Hawaii, we listened while we were swimming, also through the hull of the boat, and then, as I said, through a hydrophone, this microphone that records underwater. Being close to a humpback singer, the bass frequencies are really profound. And when you're underwater, you lose kind of all sense of directionality, and you just feel like you're in it, kind of in the thick of the song. And it was such a special experience, and I wanted to find a way to try to translate it and share it. So when I got back, I set to work designing this sort of immersive surround sound experience of humpback song, originally for Sage Chapel here at Cornell, working with my colleague in music, Kevin Ernst, and engineer Bill McQuay, and architect Kent Hubble. And this was on its way to being realized for April 2020 when COVID shut everything down and we were postponed. So I was waiting there, still kind of working on things. And then in June of 2020, Media Art Exploration, this arts and sciences organizations in New York, asked if I might extend the idea of Siren to include an artificial intelligence perspective, to create a piece that explored a kind of meeting of intelligences with human, humpback whale, and artificial. And it seemed like a great opportunity to compare the humpback singers that Katie and I had recorded, getting a computational perspective. So that the kind of expanded direction the piece took. When Katie and I were listening back to these recordings we had taken, but also further on with Kyle, when we were listening, I was hearing all these differences in how these singers realized their songs, and was kind of searching a way to kind of draw listeners into that experience. So what Kyle and I decided is that I went through and sort of manually annotated individual humpback singer songs, and my collaborator Kyle took these manual annotations and used UMAP, it's called, to lay them out in a gestural way. So UMAP is this kind of like jigsaw puzzle organizer. It's an algorithm that takes a set of things that are complicated and lays them out in a lower dimensional space. As Katie was saying, humpback song is hierarchical in its structure. Sound units are organized into phrases, which create themes, which create cyclical songs that evolve. And after I manually annotated or tagged these recordings, organizing sounds into similar units, there was an automated process of taking the tag sounds and letting UMAP lay them out in a space in a gestural way. So we can share now a video, the UMAP video of Soloist One song, which you saw pictures of him earlier, through this combination manual annotation UMAP approach. Each color represents a note or sound unit. And the cursor, the white cursor you see moving, moves the listener through the path the soloist took through that unit. And our hope was that this visual approach would help guide the listening experience, making song comparison kind of more easily accessible.
A feast for the ears and eyes, for sure. I love looking at those visuals and hearing the whale song concurrently with them. It's so visually pleasing and very well done on that. By the way, the work that you and Kyle are doing is super cool stuff. So Siren is there's many parts to this project. The next aspect of it took us to net reclamation and dealing with debris out in Provincetown. What's going on here?
Sure. So yeah, as Kyle and my work was developing, we were thinking about both the internal and the external worlds of these humpback singers, and also thinking very much influenced by my listening with Katie, songs of the humpback whale, and also hearing stories from Katie about that time around, how her, release of this record with Roger contributed to the international moratorium on commercial whaling. Those were kind of really in both Kyle's mind and in mine. And the marine scientist Michael Moore at Woods Hole has spoken about commercial whaling as the intentional killing of whales. And now we're in this period of unintentional whaling. Hundreds of thousands of whales, dolphins, and porpoises are killed every year unintentionally through their entanglement in fishing gear, which is also called bycatch or discard. And as technologies for kind of taking life from the ocean exceed our ability to protect it, Kyle and I decided to focus in Siren also on marine entanglement. It's one of the leading causes of death in the endangered North Atlantic right whale population here in the Northeast. 70 to 85% of humpbacks and North Atlantic right whales in the Gulf of Maine show signs of entanglement scarring. So I coordinated with Laura Ludwig, who directs the Marine Debris and Plastic Program at the Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown. Her program collects between 8 to 12 tons of derelict fishing gear and debris from the waters around Cape Cod every year. And again, with support from Cornell Atkinson Center for Sustainability, who I'm very grateful to. In June of 2021, I brought a big trailer and with my partner and hauled several pounds of net and rope debris back with me to Ithaca to deposit in my driveway to be incorporated into future Siren performances.
Great. Beautiful. So here we go. We've got the raw materials for Siren. And then did this debut in Martha's Vineyard? Correct me if I'm wrong. We have some footage.
Yeah, so in performances of Siren, so it did premiere at Martha's Vineyard in August. So just to kind of set the stage a little bit, the marine debris I collected from Center for Coastal Studies is built into this sort of towering sculpture, which is designed by Amy Rubin. And lights are projected onto the sculpture, a kind of sort of translation of what you saw on the screen using UMAP, translating that into the lighting design. Like the screen version, if you watch the lights closely, they also will provide a guide for listening. So every burst of sound corresponds to a flash of color, and every color has been selected by a machine learning algorithm to automatically group similar sounds. So similar sounds are given similar colors and movements across the sculpture. So let's watch the video from Martha's Vineyard from August now. It was an outdoor performance at a private residence, and the singer you hear in this excerpt is Soloist 2, who's a slide I hope we can return to later, who we followed around in Hawaii for a couple of hours recording until the wind conditions prevented us from recording further. He's a really incredible singer. It was a really amazing listening and recording experience. And there also, you can hear these kind of higher frequencies in it, which are it's kind of bacon sizzling sound, which are the sounds of snapping shrimp in this audio, as we were quite close to the shore. So here's Martha's Vineyard.
So we're rolling that now. Great. So there we go. There was the Martha's Vineyard debut of Siren. As mentioned earlier in the show, we had come together to support your show over at Cornell's Johnson Museum, where you had a similar installation. This was done indoors, and Siren has hit the road over the last year or so. You were recently in Massachusetts, if I'm not mistaken, right? So here's another
Yes.
instance of an installation. Tell me what was going on here. It looks like much bigger space than we had at Cornell here, actually.
Yes, so this was like a I think it was a 90 by 90 foot room with 27-foot ceilings, and this was at Mass MoCA in the Berkshires. And so we installed here in the net in a way that people can walk through. And you can see in this picture here, if you go back one, you see that there's this. If you go to the top kind of right hand part of the screen, this was exciting for me. I had the opportunity to play with what they're called voice of God speakers. So I had 2 speakers that were attached to the ceiling, and then 6 speakers and surrounding 2 subwoofers, and everything that I kind of had dreamed of for this piece as far as the physical experience of feeling the bass, and then also just feeling the size of the whale was sort of realized in this performance. And it was really fun to see, like, that girl kind of captures a feeling, but like the kind of awe people experienced of the sound walking in of these huge marine mammals, and there's like the beauty of their song, and then touching the net and kind of just getting to know the materials a bit and following the song and the lighting display. It was people of all ages came. It was the big free day that Mass MoCA has once a year. It was really wonderful.
That's one thing that I appreciated it too. As soon as I walked in, I knew I was in the hands of an audiophile, because my rib cage was totally rattling. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was making my teeth chatter almost, and in the best way, right? It was just very much immersive.
Feels good
because of that. It feels really good.
It feels good. Yeah.
So lots of kids. What kind of feedback did you get? Because I see that there's some photos here. You're out intermingling with people here.
Yeah, I talked to lots of folks there. I mean, kids do a lot of imitating of the song when they're hearing it. So in addition to hearing the whale song in the room, you were hearing kids imitating these kind of higher pitched sounds that humpbacks sing. And people enjoyed it. I mean, I think there was a lot that kind of feeling of awe of the sound. People don't know much about entanglement as an issue. And so I think there was some appreciation for kind of learning more about that. And I kind of like that we're working with rope too, because it really feels like we're in kind of a tangle right now as far as ocean conservation is involved. And it kind of seems like we kind of need everyone in the tangle to kind of find our way out of this. So it was a really positive experience.
And here you are reviewing the glory of your work.
I know. Hoping you wouldn't show that one, Chris.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, anyway, I've got some audience questions that I want to go to. And Katie, I want to get back to you in just a moment. A couple quick questions. These are great from the audience. First of all, Cheryl asks, can you hear the songs without an aquaphone if you're just swimming?
Yes. Katie, do you want to talk about other ways of listening besides a hydrophone?
Or hydrophone, right. Sorry.
Well, they are transmitted through the hull of the boat, through wood. We suspect that Odysseus, who was warned, what are they called, Annie?
The sirens.
That's that the sirens that in the Odysseus story were probably whales. In those days, although not now, there were humpbacks in the Mediterranean.
Hey, I have a question from viewer Smita.
Can I add one more thing? So you please. Can, as Katie was saying, goes through the hull of the boat, and you also listen while swimming. If you get your head down far enough, you put your kind of feet in the air, you can hear especially the lower frequencies in the water. It's spectacular. And we were there in February, which is sort of like the height of the breeding season, and there were a lot of whales singing.
Viewer Smita asks, do all whale species sing?
No, but several do. But there's only one that sings as elaborate a song as the humpback, and that's the bowhead up near the Arctic. But I think that we could say that blue whales sing, but they just make one song repeatedly, one sound, not a song. Mm-hmm. No one sings with with the qualities of the humpback song, either the listening qualities, the learning qualities, the fancy, elegant transmission of parts of the song and selection of what the listener is imitating. It's really unique.
Very good point. So we wanted to return to everyone's other favorite soloist 2. Let's talk about soloist 2. Annie, you mentioned you wanted to come back to him.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of show kind of where he had been cited before. And so this was a whale that, again, that we sort of followed around one day, who just kind of kept singing. And when we left, he was still singing. And often when we were recording, it was such that, you know, conditions on top of the water were such that we had to leave. It wasn't because the singer had stopped singing, which was what made Soloist 1 so sort of remarkable that day, is that he stopped and then we saw all this activity above water. So this guy eventually kind of drifted away from us. But I have, you know, I think 2 hours of recordings of him singing from the day we were out.
So Katie, you have some plans for the future. You seem tireless and ceaseless in this endeavor. You know, clearly driven. What's next for you and Annie? One of my favorite partnerships I've witnessed in recent years. What's next for you two?
Well, we would love to know more about the lives of these amazing travelers. They travel, you know, from one part of their behavior to another. When they're feeding, they're not singing very much, sometimes not singing at all. And when they are singing, they're with females and infants, and they're breeding, and they're in a wholly different environment. And they do this seasonally, so they do this every year. I'd love to know. My dream would be to be a whale and to be with them and to see what they're up to from Hawaii. So our experience in Hawaii was connected with the migration pattern from Southeast Alaska. And we are invited to go to Southeast Alaska, where our dear friend Chris Gabriel lives and works, and be with those whales. And at that time of year, when they are feeding, there's lots of whale sound, but it's the sounds of females partly. You see, we haven't talked at all about females making sound. And we'd like to help her record from non-singers and find out what's going on there. And then we'd like to get out and migrate with them to Hawaii, but that's practically impossible because the weather is dreadful during that migratory transit. And,
sorry, go ahead, Katie.
And then it's always a new experience to compare this year's song. Well, what we found in the Hawaiian work was that the changes occur in the middle of the singing season, which is also the height of the breeding season. And that makes us think that perhaps to change is attractive to females.
Mm-hmm.
That may be one of the driving forces for the changing is female choice. And for a novelty to be introduced into a cultural trend, and this is true, I think, for humans as well, it must have a balance of conformity and originality. And that is so powerfully apparent in the songs of whales that we have watched during the changing period. So I would just love to be in Hawaii again during a different changing period and see what goes on this time.
I have a great question that just came in from viewer Bridget. Bridget asks, are whale pods or families hierarchical? And if so, is the evolution of a song driven by any particular or dominant member? Can you speak to Bridget's question here?
Yeah, well, I searched for evidence that a certain singer was leading the way for the changing, and did not find it. But I must say, we're making a lot of assumptions. We are assuming that the sample that we collected is typical of the entire population, and it never is. We just got, we were just lucky a certain number of times. But the fact that when we had good luck and got good recordings, we always found other whales singing with the same things going on, suggests that these are population-wide behaviors. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
I believe so, to the best of your knowledge. Yeah, of course. Viewers, real quick, I want to share one other thing here. And Annie, maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I've got a resource that we were going to share in the chat called Pattern Radio. This is whale songs that were recorded using AI to explore thousands of hours of humpback whale songs and make your own discoveries. Tell us a little bit about this particular resource that we're dropping in the chat for the audience.
Sure. So this is a web tool that came out in 2019. It was the work of Google Creative Lab. And as Chris said, it's thousands of hours of humpback whale song that was recorded with passive recording units. So I think anchored or buoyed recording units off of Hawaii, I believe. And essentially, the site uses AI to detect patterns. You can kind of zoom in and zoom out and explore song over this kind of gigantic period of time and kind of perhaps make some sense of it. When song is present, when song is not present, where there's patterning. And there are tours led by various people, including Chris Clark, who was the director of the Center for Conservation Bioacoustics, David Rothenberg, and a few other people. And this is actually where I met Kyle McDonald as well. But it's a great resource. Could be a great tool for teachers to use to teach humpback whale song in classrooms. And it's also there. It's a good place also to hear many other noises in the ocean environment. There was a question about anthropogenic ocean noise, and you do see in this recording, of course, these long passages where there's what's called, Chris Clark calls acoustic bleaching, where there's like this whole whiteout of the full frequency spectrum. Mm-hmm. And you, of course, are left wondering, how could any animal compete with this, try to communicate when it's just so loud and it's covering all frequencies. So it's a really fascinating tool. Yeah, if people have questions about it too, I'm happy. Feel free to shoot me an email.
Yeah, you bet. That's something that I noticed too when I was checking it out. I'm like, oh, well, that sounds like a giant freighter going by very slowly for a long time. Not being trained to exactly what's going on in the frequencies. Those are the impressions that I got. So Annie, what's next for you up at Cornell? As it relates to the work that you're doing on campus and your teaching and your research and so on.
Yeah, so the big thing I'm thinking about right now, in addition to hoping to get to Alaska with Katie this summer so we can listen to humpback communication up there, and I'm very interested in kind of song transitions, is I'm going to do a kind of exploratory trip back to the Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown this spring break. I'm interested in developing a 1-credit field course for undergraduates at Cornell, where over spring break for the next couple of years, we could go to Provincetown for the week, learn from marine mammal scientists there about acoustic communication, do a lot of listening, and then participate in their big ocean cleanup effort in the Marine Debris and Plastics program.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, I see that we're coming up to the end of the hour. I want to thank you two for joining us. Katie and Annie, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for helping us put together this whole thing together. Thanks for your preparedness, and thank you to the audience for joining us as well today. Your questions were excellent and kept us going. Again, always a genuine pleasure to have you two. I want to thank you two for joining us today and making it through the blizzard without a power outage during this keynote. Thanks so much, you two. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, you bet. Thanks, audience. We'll see you at the next keynote. Stay strong, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.